You know what's strange? We've turned every generation into a stereotype. Boomers get reduced to houses and pensions. Millennials get boxed into brunch and rent anxiety. Gen Z gets framed as non-stop hustle machines. Everyone gets analyzed, labeled, picked apart. But there's an entire generation sitting quietly in the middle, moving money in ways that look contradictory on the surface. And somehow, almost no one talks about them. Generation X. Born between 1965 and 1980. They're that coworker who never talks about money but somehow owns more assets than people twice as loud. The uncle with solid savings who still refuses to replace a 15-year-old car. The friend who'll drop hundreds on a concert without blinking, then argue over a few dollars at the grocery store. And here's the part most people miss. None of this is random. Their money behavior follows a pattern. A very specific psychology shaped by a moment in time that rewired how they see security forever. Picture this. It's the early 1980s. You're a kid, maybe 10 years old, standing in a bank next to your parent. Same job for years. Same paycheck rhythm. The teller recognizes them. There's a pension waiting at the end. Savings accounts actually grow with interest. The mortgage has a clear finish line. Everything feels predictable, stable. There's a formula. Work hard, stay loyal, save consistently, retire comfortably. It makes sense. It feels safe. Now fast forward. It's 2008. You're in your 30s. You followed that exact formula. You did what you were told. And suddenly, everything cracks. Retirement accounts shrink overnight. Home values collapse. Companies start cutting people who gave them decades. Stability turns out to be conditional. That moment didn't just hurt financially. It broke trust, and once trust in the system is gone, every financial decision after that starts coming from a different place. This is where Gen X becomes fascinating. They are deeply anxious about the future, but incredibly disciplined at preparing for it. They worry more than most generations about retirement, yet they consistently save, invest, and plan. It looks contradictory until you understand the mindset. They don't save because they're confident. They save because they're not. It's a quiet kind of fear-driven discipline. Psychologists describe this as defensive pessimism. Expect the worst, prepare for it, and you won't be caught off guard. It's mentally exhausting, but for them it works. Because from their perspective, the fear isn't irrational. They've already seen what happens when things fall apart. That same mindset shows up in how they earn money. Long before side hustle became a trendy phrase, Gen X was already doing it. Not for passion, not for personal branding, for protection. Multiple income streams weren't about ambition. They were about backup plans. They watched stable careers disappear without warning. They saw loyalty get rewarded with layoffs. So they adapted. Keep the main job, but quietly build something on the side. Consulting, freelancing, rentals, small businesses. Not because they dream of quitting their job tomorrow, but because they never want to depend on one source again. It's less about chasing opportunity and more about reducing vulnerability. Here's another interesting contradiction. They'll leave jobs without much hesitation, but stay loyal to brands, products, and places for decades. On the surface, that feels backwards. But psychologically, it's consistent. Institutions lost their trust. People and experiences didn't. A company can replace you overnight. A system can fail without warning. But a local business owner, a product that's never let you down, a brand tied to personal memory, those feel reliable in a way corporations don't. So they disconnect from large systems while holding on to smaller, more personal forms of trust. It's not nostalgia. It's selective loyalty. Now let's talk about how they spend. Because this is where things get really interesting. Gen X is financially cautious in most areas, but surprisingly generous when it comes to experiences. Travel, concerts, events, moments that don't leave a physical trace. It seems inconsistent until you look deeper. They don't fully trust material value. They've seen assets lose value, markets crash, and possessions become irrelevant during downturns. But experiences? Those don't depreciate the same way. A memory doesn't lose half its value in a bad economy. No one can repossess a moment. So while they protect their financial base aggressively, they're willing to spend on things that feel permanent in a different way. It's not careless spending. It's selective investment in what they believe actually lasts. Their relationship with financial advice reflects the same pattern. Gen X tends to be skeptical of experts, yet deeply invested in learning. They'll read, research, compare, analyze, often managing things themselves rather than handing control over. Not because they think they know everything, but because they don't fully trust anyone else to. They grew up in a time where self-education was normal, where you figured things out without relying on constant guidance. At the same time, they've seen what happens when people blindly trust financial systems or professionals who get it wrong. So they double-check everything. Learn first, trust later. It's not arrogance. It's caution shaped by experience. Debt is another area where their thinking stands out. They're not necessarily anti-debt, but they're extremely intentional about it. Structured debt, like a mortgage or a business investment, is acceptable because it's predictable. There's a timeline, a plan, a clear outcome. But open-ended, high-interest debt? That's where they draw the line. Credit cards, impulsive borrowing. Anything that feels uncontrollable. That's what they avoid. Because to them, the real risk isn't borrowing itself, it's losing control over the outcome. If they can map it, they can manage it. If they can't, they don't want it. Even their habits around record-keeping reveal the same mindset. While they're perfectly capable with technology, many still keep physical copies of important documents. Not because they're behind, but because they've seen systems fail. Digital platforms crash. Data disappears. Companies make mistakes. Paper becomes a form of backup, a physical layer of certainty in a world that increasingly relies on invisible systems. It's redundancy by design, not trusting one method completely, so you create multiple layers of security. When you step back and look at the full picture, Gen X doesn't appear inconsistent anymore. They appear adapted. Every behavior, every contradiction, every unusual habit traces back to the same core experience. Growing up with stability, then watching it unravel. They learned the rules early, followed them, and then realized the rules could change without warning. That realization reshaped everything. It made them cautious, but not frozen. Skeptical, but still engaged. Prepared, but never fully at ease. They're not chasing extremes, they're managing risk. Quietly, consistently, without needing attention. They save because they've seen loss. They diversify because they've seen dependence fail. They spend on moments because they've seen things lose meaning. They question systems because they've watched them break. It's not confusion. It's strategy built from experience. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Money habits aren't random. They're responses. Patterns shaped by the environment you grew up in, the events you lived through, the risks you learned to notice. Gen X just happens to be one of the clearest examples of that. They don't fully trust the system, but they still participate in it. They prepare for the worst, but keep moving forward anyway. Because from their perspective, that's the only way to play a game where the rules can change at any time.